Hey guys, Spirit of the Law here. In this video, we're going to be looking at ways you can save 100% on the cost of your farms. 60 wood each is pretty demanding, especially in today's economy, so getting them for free sounds ideal. Unlike most buildings, you can't convert farms with a monk. They can target the mill or the villager on it, but don't recognize the farm itself. That said, if you can get the enemy to stop farming for a moment, you can then steal the farm with a villager, after which the game basically treats it as one of your own. This works not just on enemy farms, but even farms built by your allies. Really, you can claim any abandoned farm, and in this video, we're going to look at all of the weird rules, exceptions, and civilization interactions that come out as a consequence of this sometimes pretty useful mechanic. To begin with, keep in mind this only works on farms without a villager assigned to them. Here, we can't claim this farm because while a farmer isn't technically standing on it, there's one already assigned to it who is walking toward it from across the map. To prevent double farming, the game is very strict about knowing which villager is currently associated with each farm, though it might be fun if down the road there is a civilization who could assign 2 farmers per farm. All this to say, you can't sneak in while a villager is dropping off food to a mill, though if you could get the villager to attack you, then you could steal the farm from right out under them. At that point, it's now officially yours, and you could even delete it. This would obviously be poor manners online and sort of risky around a town center, but is technically possible to do. The more practical and common application, though, is making use of farms around a defeated opponent's town center. If you build your own town center where your opponent's was previously standing, villagers will auto-convert enemy farms placed within 8 tiles. Notice they won't convert a farm that's under attack by your units though, which is actually an interesting little exception. These are all good reasons that if you've destroyed one player's base, but the game is still ongoing, you may want to avoid attacking farms, and just claim them as your own. One bit of unit logic that helps avoid this happening too much is military units will ignore farms if there's any other type of building in their search radius. It's only when there's no other type of building in range that a unit will target a farm, so they naturally become the last thing that's destroyed most of the time. This also works with a mill, so you don't have to spend the 100 stone for a town center, which in the late game is arguably more important than a few extra farms worth of wood. This automated conversion behavior works on unclaimed ally farms as well, as long as there isn't a villager already assigned to them. That all said, it's pretty easy to prevent players from doing this by deleting your own farms as you abandon your town, or delete your allies if an enemy player is trying to take over their base. A little team game pro tip is that if your ally leaves, you gain the ability to delete their buildings, which in this case you may end up wanting to replace with some of your own. Not only is that handy for claiming their farms, but can also be useful for clearing trade routes, opening walls, and a few other situations as well. But how exactly is all of this working? Are you actually stealing the farm as it was, or is it just being replaced by one of your own? To get to the bottom of this, here we have Red, who's in the Dark Age. It's already taken a bit of damage, and I'll grab it when it has 100 food left out of its original 175. My unit here is a post-Imperial Lithuanian villager, so I have all of the farming upgrades already researched. Given these starting conditions, there's several ways this could be handled potentially by the game. The most logical is that the damage the farm has taken and the amount of food left are going to be unchanged after I convert it. Alternately, it might reset to the full 550 food that I'd get from a newly built farm, or maybe it'll say the farm is a little under half used up and give me a prorated amount of food. So let's find out how the game treats this situation. After stealing it, we can see the farm is not healed and retains its previous damage. That part looks like I'm just taking the existing farm as it is, but note the food amount actually doesn't make any sense. In this case, it went from 100 to 565 food, while even the most generous interpretation had me expecting 550, as that's the amount of food my farms have if I build them from scratch. If I try it again with the farmer having barely touched the farm, it gives a slightly different 560 food this time. That's actually even less food, and trying it once more with as little as 25 food left on the farm, it again jumps back up to 565 when I take it. This is all a little confusing, but what if we switch the tech advantage? Now Blue is in the Dark Age and Red is post-Imperial. Pushing the unit off of his farm, when I take it, I don't get the benefit of the farming techs that Red has, and instead I get close to the 175 food I'm expecting and would get from building the farm myself. But again, notice it ends up being a little more for some reason. I wondered if this was a scenario editor bug and tried it instead on a random map. Here I'm Huns, so my farm should have 375 food when I build them, and I'm stealing farms from Italians, who start with 550 food per farm. Whether I take a farm with tons of food left, or that's been mostly finished off, it's clear I'm getting food based on my techs that I've researched, plus an extra 15 for some reason. From a food perspective, the game seems to be treating it as if I built a brand new farm, but in most other ways that logic doesn't carry over. Remember, the HP damage was inherited, plus notice that converting farms doesn't add to your economic score, so the game seems pretty clear on the fact that you didn't actually build anything, or you'd be getting 12 points each time. As for why there's a mysterious amount of extra food when you steal a farm, I really don't have an explanation. It's a very strange mistake the game is making, and I've seen everything from 1 extra food up to 15, with no obvious pattern. The fact that the amount of food resets means this is technically exploitable, and you could simply swap farms with an ally to avoid ever having to reseed. Here I have 2 allies, swapping when their farms are almost exhausted, and both farms are instantly refreshed with no additional wood cost. Generally, the micromanagement involved here is probably a waste of time and attention in practice, but now you'll know for next time you're in a game with a max population of 5, or your team has chopped every tree on the map. The next obvious question is, of course, how does this work with Civ bonuses? Generally, like the mill upgrades, farms you steal reflect your bonuses and not the bonuses of the previous farm owner, though there's a few strange exceptions. For example, if you're the Chinese or have a Chinese ally, you do get the effect when stealing even non-Chinese farms. Similarly, as you'd probably expect, stealing a farm from a Chinese player doesn't give you any extra food, in the same way you can't benefit from any mill techs that they've researched. But what if you're allied with someone else who's allied with the Chinese, but you're enemy to the Chinese player? It turns out no, the team bonus doesn't travel by association, and you just get a regular farm. Similarly, Sicilians get double the effect from their mill techs, Khmer farmers work as usual, and Mayans had their longer lasting resources bonus applied as if it was one they built. Actually, Khmer farmers are particularly good at stealing abandoned enemy farms since you don't need to worry about building a mill or town center. As for the Poles, they get 10% of a farm's total food collected instantly when it's built beside a folwark, and it would be great to find a way to borrow that somehow as another civilization. Unfortunately, even though folwarks can be converted and used as a mill, other civilizations can't tap into that bonus, either by building or taking over Polish farms nearby. Likewise, as Poles, the game knows that stealing farms is not the same as building them yourself. You can save wood overall by commandeering existing ones, but if anything, it's actually a little slower food income without your bonus. Now, Slavs, on the other hand, are a very strange case. They have a Civ bonus for faster farmers, which in one part is just a straight buff to their collection rate, but to enable their farming bonus to show, their farms themselves also need to be able to grow food faster. Typical farms only allow food to be taken at 24 food per minute, which often becomes the limiting factor for civilizations with handcart. Part of the Slavs' bonus behind the scenes is that their farms have to produce food faster, or else the Slav bonus would disappear in the late game. It turns out the farm's growth rate when it was first built is preserved when a farm is stolen. Effectively, that means Slav players stealing farms are just getting generic ones, and after handcart are effectively losing their entire farming bonus. Likewise, other civilizations stealing farms originally built by a Slav villager have the higher yield, so they're able to circumvent the usual 24 food per minute limit and farm up to 26 food per minute with handcart. In a similar way, the benefit from the Byzantine HP bonus is also permanent and attached to the farm no matter how many times it's stolen. Though that said, this is probably the least useful application of the Byzantines' extra building HP. An arguably more useful Civ bonus to keep in mind is the Teutons' cheaper farms. You could probably come up with a situation where it would make sense for a Teuton player to build your farms for you, since they cost 40% less and you could then convert and use them yourself. Again, it doesn't seem incredibly practical to me on a large scale, but there's nothing stopping you from doing it. Of course, all of this logic also applies to stealing fish traps as well. It would be easy for someone to forget to delete them or not notice, but stealing fish traps works exactly the same as farms. In some ways, this is even more satisfying, since fish traps are 100 wood compared to 60 wood for farms. It resets the amount of food they hold as well, and Malay, for example, also benefit from their bonus, giving triple the usual amount of food. You could theoretically have a Malay fishing ship build the traps at a discount, and you could convert them after, but of course it resets the food amount to the usual for your civilization when you claim it. Naturally, you can still use the same cheesy trick of flipping them between players if you want to refresh how much food they have. So hopefully there was at least one useful tip for you in there, and like I said, the main practical application of this is just stealing enemy farms, but now you have a bit better idea of what's going on behind the scenes. Big thanks to Jockster, Seb, Brian, John Paul, Kyle, Justin, James, Woodruff, John, Samantha, and everyone else on Patreon for their awesome support. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.